الله أكبر الله أكبر
الله أكبر الله أكبر
الله أكبر
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله
حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة
اللهم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله
حي على الفلاح
اللهم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله
حي على الفلاح
اللهم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله
الله أكبر الله أكبر
الله أكبر الله أكبر
لا إله إلا الله
حقا ودائما أبدا لا إله إلا الله ودائما مرتقم ودائما الحمد لله فاطر الوجود من العدم وجاعل النور من الظلم ومخرج الصبر من الألم وملقي التوبة على الندم فنشكره على المصائب كما نشكره على النعم ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الأكرم ذو الشرف الأشم والنور الأتم والكتاب المحكم خير ولد آدم الذي بشر به عيسى ابن مريم ودعا لبعثته إبراهيم عليه السلام حين يرفع قواعد بيت الله المحرم فنصلي ونسلم ونبارك على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إن أصدق الحديث كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد بن عبد الله وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أوصيكم وإياي بتقوى الله وحسن عبادته. All praise is due to Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, and peace and blessings be upon His last and final messenger. He who Allah guides will never be misguided, and he who Allah misguides will never be guided. We begin today's khutbah with a question that many of us have, many of our youth have, and even many of us as adults have. Can I be a Muslim Canadian? And what is my identity as a Muslim Canadian? What is my identity as a Muslim at large? And due to the onslaught of attack towards Muslims and Islam in the recent past, it becomes harder and harder to be a Muslim Canadian and to feel like we belong. But the reality is, Islam has been ingrained within Western society and within Canadian society. The first census ever done in Canada in 1871, it highlighted that there was 15 European Muslims in Canada. So 4 years after Canada even became a country, there were Muslims already here. Just across the border, George Washington, the founder of the United States, was known to have his own personal mushaf, his own Quran that he used to read from. A mosque was built in the 1800s in Florida. And for nearly 1,000 years, Muslims lived in Spain all the way until southern France. Islam is ingrained within Western society everywhere we look. And there's a reason for that. There's a greatness in our religion that allows for us to become Canadian Muslims, and Arab Muslims, and Desi Muslims, and Chinese Muslims. And this value is what allows Islam to infuse itself in every aspect. Islam takes what is good and leaves what is evil. And this is why when the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet, he didn't eradicate all of the Arabic cultures and values. But on the contrary, the ones that were good, the ones that promoted excellence, He instilled them. And the ones that were evil, He took them away. And this is a teaching in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands His Prophet, and in essence commands every single one of us. He says, خُذِ الْعُرْفِ وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَأَعْرُضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. Be gracious, enjoin what is right, and turn away from those that are ignorant. And He says in the Quran, another verse, وَلِتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةً يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَتَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And amongst you there has to be a group of individuals that command good and forbid evil. It's not command only what is Islam, or command only the Arabic or the Qurashi way of life, but command what is good. Wherever we see khayr, wherever we see good, that in of itself is part of Islam. And the scholars have explained, what is al-ma'ruf? Al-ma'ruf is everything that is excellent in terms of rationale that does not contradict the Islamic teachings. So look around us. Assess our daily lives. Ask ourselves the question, can we be Canadians and Muslim? Can I be a Muslim Canadian? And the answer without a doubt is yes. Our values and many Canadian values do not contradict. And the Prophet ﷺ embodied this with a key principle. He says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was sent down to perfect manners. And He didn't say I was sent down to create new manners or begin manners from the beginning, that everything you know is wrong. But He took it from another sense. He said, I was sent to perfect the manners that the Arabs had at the time and every single culture and society has. So if a specific value, a specific characteristic is good, then it is good. And we see this in why Islam expanded so quickly. There is this narrative that the Muslims expanded by the sword, and it's a false narrative. The country with the greatest percentage of Muslims and the greatest number of Muslims is Indonesia, where not one battle was fought in this country. How did they become Muslim? What eluded them to Islam? It was the characteristics of the Muslims. It was the ihsan and the excellence, the way the Muslims dealt with them, that made these individuals fall in love with Islam. And this is why everywhere you look, you'll see Islam looks a little bit different in every country, but the core values of the Muslims are the same. If we go to Africa, we see African Muslims. If we go to China, we see Chinese Muslims. And if we go to Spain, we see Spanish Muslims. And we see these differences in certain key areas. Amongst them, for example, as a simple example, if we look at architecture, even looking at our most recent past, the Spanish Inquisition happened in 1492. At the time, there was a massive masjid in the middle of the city of Córdoba called Masjid Córdoba. And this masjid, if you see it from the outside, you couldn't tell that it was a mosque. You would assume that it's just any building, like any building in Córdoba. But when you walk inside it, you can see the Islamic touch. The Islamic touch that the Muslims had in Spain. And you see that touch everywhere you go. And this is why Islam is so flexible, that the scholars, even before giving an opinion, they would look at something called urf al-'ada, meaning the customs of the people. So the fiqhi opinion that would be given based on the time that you are in, the place that you are in. And this is why Islam was able to spread so easily. Because of the way it was able to adapt to the people that Islam was coming to. And the Prophet ﷺ, made everyone feel welcome within the religion of Islam. And this is something that many of us have forgotten. This pride that we must have as Muslims. Proud of our heritage, proud of our lineage. Proud of who we are. And the only way we can be proud of who we are is if we know our history. And know the values that make us Muslim and realize that these values are ingrained within our society here in Canada. Amongst these values is justice for all, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Look at the Muslim empire. For nearly 1,000 years, conquered most of the known world. Yet within countries like Egypt, we have the Coptics living freely. And that's just one example of many examples throughout the entire Muslim world. Islam allowed for people of other faith and allowed for discussion and discourse. And this is one of the characteristics of Canada. And this is why when someone asks, are you a Canadian Muslim? We have to be proud and say, yes, we share the same values, many of the same values that Canadians do. But the only way we can know what to reject and what to accept is by knowing who we are and what we have to offer. And this was instilled by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He instilled within the Sahaba this love of Islam, this love of who they were, and they were able to spread that throughout their lifetime. And we see this in Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, in his Khilafah, a Jewish man came to him, showing Umar ibn Khattab's justice, showing Umar ibn Khattab's compassion. Came to him and he says, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, I can't pay my jizya, the payment that I give, the tax that I give at this time. And Umar ibn Khattab, with his compassion, realizing that you bring people closer to Islam more with compassion than with anger and with strength. He says, Wallahi ma ansafnak, نأخذ منك شابا ثم نضيعك شيخا. Truly, we haven't been just to you. If we take from you when you are young and we forget you when you are old. The narrators say the compassion that Amir al-Mu'mineen had with this individual brought this individual closer to Islam, brought this individual to make shahada. So the question that I have to ask from us today, as Canadian Muslims, have we been giving da'wah the way we should? Are we spreading Islam in the right way? When our neighbors that aren't Muslim ask about us, talk about us, what do they say? Are they happy that they have Muslim Canadians living next door? Are they proud to know us as individuals, as Muslims, or are they not? And if the answer is no, have we truly represented Islam correctly? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to represent Islam correctly in all of our actions. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. The question still stands. The first question is now understood. Yes, we can be Muslim Canadians. And yes, many of the values that Canadians hold are values that were within Islam. So why do so many of our youth shy away from their Muslim identities? Why do so many of us shy away from our Muslim identities? Why do we change our names or try to blend in or try to hide who we really are? And the reason is that Muslims, the sad reality is we are in a state of weakness. And the only way to solve a problem is to know there is one. And the reality is we are in a state of weakness. And we're going to ask, when is the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala coming? When will Muslims be great again? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِن تَنصُرُوا اللَّهَ يَنصُرْكُمْ وَيُثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَكُمْ. O who you believe, when you give victory to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give victory to you. And He will steadfast your positions. So the question becomes, how do we give victory to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Give victory to Allah. Allah gives us victory. How do we give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala victory? We give victory to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we learn the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we follow its teachings. When we ask ourselves every step of the way, am I following the teachings of Allah and His Messenger? And if I'm not, how do I return? How do I go back? And in essence, when we do that, we are doing something that the Prophet ﷺ called ihsan. It's a form of excellence. And ihsan is أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تراه فتعلم أنه يراك أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. To worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see Him. He's standing right in front of you. But know that even if you don't see Him, realize that He sees you. So when you come to do something incorrect, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. How can I do this? When I'm going to park illegally or do something that I know is wrong, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. How can I do this? When I come to do something that I know my neighbor or my friend or my colleague or this person or that, if they were to watch me do it, I would never dare. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. And some of the ulama would say, لِمَا جَعَلْتُ اللَّهُ أَهْوَيُ النَّاظِرِينَ إِلَيْكُمْ. Why have we made Allah the least important individual to look at us, to see us, knowing that He sees us in every aspect of our life? And this is why when the Muslims understood that value and lived with that value, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching, then and only then did they attain victory. Did the world, the language of science, of ulum, was the Arabic language. Because everybody wanted to be like the Muslims. People wanted, even those that weren't Muslim wanted to be like the Muslims. And even having ihsan in the way we treat others. To continue talking about the Spanish Muslims and the Masjid of Córdoba in 1492, when the Spaniards decided to have their Spanish Inquisition and kill anyone that wasn't following the Christian faith. One masjid sat as an eyesore for the church. This Masjid of Córdoba, if any one of us have ever been, it's a massive building right in the middle of the city. And the church wanted to destroy it. And what was interesting is at that time all the Muslims had already been kicked out of Córdoba. Who defended this masjid? Who stopped this masjid from being destroyed? Its neighbors. The non-Muslim neighbors that were in the area were the ones that protected the masjid. Realizing that the Muslims, the excellence that they had in their architecture, the excellence that they had in their mannerisms, in the way they treated their neighbors, is what made them stand up and defend that masjid. So the church couldn't even destroy the masjid. What all they could do was they decided to build a church right in the middle of the masjid. And even that church, you can see it when you go to the Masjid of Córdoba, it's an eyesore. It looks so unappealing. But what was kept was the identity and the heritage that the Muslims had left behind, which is excellence. Their legacy, the legacy of us as Muslims, is in our excellence that they had. But what if we don't have this excellence? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already tells us what happens if we don't have this excellence. He says, وَإِن تَتَوَلَّوْا يَسْتَبْدِلُ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَكُونُوا أَمْثَالَكُمْ. If we don't have this ihsan, this excellence in everything that we do, realizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us, giving victory to Allah and giving victory to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by staying firm on the deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He will just change us. He will bring a group of people that are different than us and they will not act like any one of us. So what is our homework? What do we do today? First and foremost, we have to learn about our religion. Learn about our deen. And instill the love of Allah and His Messenger in our hearts. And instill it within our children. They have to be proud of who they are. When you give your son the name of Umar, he has to know who Sayyidina Umar was. Who did you name him after? What was so special about that name that you gave him that name? When you instill these lessons into the hearts of our children, they will become proud of who they are. Proud of their Muslim identity. So they know that the values that Muslims hold is what makes us special and what makes us Canadian Muslims. Number two, do good and forbid evil everywhere that we are. Wherever you see good, follow it. Wherever you see evil, push it away. And lastly, have excellence in everything that we do. Ask yourself this question. Every single day before you sleep, did I have excellence in everything that I did today? Did I work excellently? Did I spend time with my family excellently? Being present is important because you realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. It doesn't matter if my boss is there or this person or that person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. So I'm going to have excellence in all of my actions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to have ihsan in all of our actions. Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt. Allahumma hdina wahdi bina waj'alna sababan liman ihtada. Allahumma hdina wahdi bina waj'alna sababan liman ihtada. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واستغفروه يغفر لكم وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر
الله.
لا إله إلا الله.
Oh, Sheikh, okay, perfect. That's awkward. Fill the insides first, please. There's still space in the back. Inshallah, we're praying Asr right after Salat al-Jum'ah at 5:05. استووا استقيموا وارحمني ويرحمكم الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. تبارك اسمه وتعالى جد ولا لا غيره. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله، فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء، والله على كل شيء قدير. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها، لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت، ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا، ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا، ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به، واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا، أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم. سبحان ربي العظيم. سبحان ربي العظيم. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. تحياتي لله تحياتي لله تحياتي لله طيبات. السلام عليك يا نبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.